Creation, not evolution. The emphasis is very much on the word creation. I will mention evolution in passing, but not to any great extent. And I hope to demonstrate tonight, by just looking at one creature, how there is a creator. That in fact, all life forms around us have been wonderfully designed. But we just read Genesis chapter 1, and we as Christadelphians believe wholeheartedly in that record. And what a majestic chapter it is. And it starts off in a grand way, doesn't it? And straightway, modern man at any rate is challenged, because right in the beginning of that very first sentence we read, "In the beginning God created." And then Genesis chapter 1 tells us something of how we did it. It's not a great scientific treatise, such as some would desire, but nevertheless, God explains so that all men have access to it. An explanation, some understanding for all men and women as to how he created. So in the beginning, God created. There we are, straight from the beginning. We have a challenge set before us, which we, as I say, Christadelphians believe wholeheartedly. And as you read on from Genesis 1 and through the Bible, you become more and more convinced. Just want to take you down to verses 20 and 21, which we read, concerning the fifth day, where we have life coming into being, where we see the fish created and the birds of the air. And I've brought you to these two verses because we're going to focus in on that which a creature that lives very much in the waters, every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind. We're told that that's God at work there in creating all life forms in the seas and in the waters. And we're going to look at one creature now. What are these gentlemen eating? I don't think jellied eels are so popular now as they used to be. But at one time, eels were eaten a lot in this country. And in certain parts of the world, it's still quite a common food. In fact, if you go to Holland, you'll know that the Dutch eat quite a bit of eels if they can get them. More of that in due course. But if you were going to struggle as to what they were eating, I was just going to show you this and just ask you if you knew what the otter was eating. You know, the third one, clearly it's an eel, and it's a heron. So we're going to talk about the eel for about the next 30 minutes. It's not I'm a scientist, and I've done some extensive research on the eel. Not at all. I'm just a common man, and all the information I'm going to present to you I've just found in the internet and a book or two. But that which I've found, I obviously think is impressive enough to share with you. The eel, as I say. And I want to bring you to this character, Johannes Schmid, who was a Dane, and in the 1920s spent a fair bit of time researching the eel. And interesting English we've got here. He wrote a journal to the Royal Society, and as I say, interesting English, sort of old-fashioned English, so I don't know quite how he picked that up, but nevertheless I hope we can get the gist of this passage. He talks about the eel question. We know then that the old eels vanish from our ken into the sea, and that the sea sends us in return innumerable hosts of elvers. So I'll just show you what he's referring to. So there's an old eel, and in that first paragraph he's saying, we know they go from the rivers, they go out to the sea, and they disappear from us. And then later on, some months later, we get back elvers, which are very young eels, obviously. But whether, to continue his quote, but whether have these eels, have they wandered, these old eels, and whence have the elvers come? And what are the still younger stages like, which precede the elver stage in the development of the eel? It is such problems that constitute the eel question. So there's this mystery, and it's there right through to the 1920s, of the life cycle of the eel. We know big eels that go from the river back into the seas. We know these small versions of an eel that come the other way. But where did they originate from? And what happens in the meantime between the eels that go out and the small ones that come in? So this was the eel question. And I'll tell you that even in 2016, there is somewhat of a mystery still to be solved. There's still things to be sorted out on this situation. And of course, it's only mysterious to man. God, who created them, knows exactly their life cycle and knows everything all the way around. And he was a little bit unfair, really, was our Danish scientist, because in 1886, a Frenchman did a little bit of work on the eel. He found these, I believe it was in the Mediterranean. He caught some Leptocephalus breviarius. I made a real mess of it. I rather like what's in brackets, flathead. That will do for now. He caught some flathead. And everyone up to that point, up to 1886, and a little bit later, I'll show you that in a moment, all thought they were fish. All thought they were fish. Well, he got these so-called fish, took them home to his laboratory, and from these small 2-inch, 5-centimetre creatures that were supposed to be fish, he actually found himself feeding up and having eels before him. And it just pauses in there. It just shows you, it's a little demonstration of how ignorant man can be for so long. You know, men even in the 1880s thought they were pretty sharp and knew quite a bit. Well, these fish were not fish at all, they're eels. Poor chap, it took him to 1893 before people actually recognised his work. They gave him a bit of a hard time. But by 1893 it was accepted indeed that the flatheads are actually very small eels. The reason why they're called flathead is you can perhaps anticipate, you know, it's very flat, leaf-like shape. In fact, I've got that in that paragraph, a leaf-like 2-inch creature. Well, going back to our friend Mr. Schmid, in the 1920s, as I say, he started to look into this further, and he went out into the Atlantic. Must have been out there weeks on end researching, and he found out that the further he went out to sea, the smaller these flatheads seemed to be. So he may well have found some that were about 2 inches, then it went down to 1 inch, and smaller they went. And in 1922 he went as far as the Sargasso Sea, which is south of Bermuda. There's a map for you, and I understand the Sargasso Sea is the only sea in the world without a coastline, which is kind of strange in itself, but there we are. He went as far as there, and then he could find no young eels, as it were, any smaller. So he found something out that nobody else was aware of before, and he identified that the Sargasso Sea was the area where the spawning grounds must be for these fish. That's what an eel is. It's a type of fish. Despite what I said earlier, it's a fish creature, but it's not fish in the normal sense, as I'm sure you'll understand. But anyway, Sargasso Sea being the place of their origin. Now, just to make life a little bit more interesting, as well as the European eel that we're talking about now, there is something called the American eel, and they also come from the Sargasso Sea, but they go up to the North American coastline, up to Canada and so on. But I'm not going to talk about those, and there are some differences between the two. But the Sargasso Sea from there seems to be the birthplace for these young eels. And in his research, but in my paragraph above, by the time these actually get to our shores, get over to Europe, Thanks for the Gulf Stream bringing them on their way, and it may take a year, might take up to 3 years. Again, there's a bit of a mystery on that, bit of debate on that, even now. Saying 2016, how long does it actually take? Common view at the moment is it might take up to 3 years. By the time they get there, 3.5 inches long. Something of that order, or 9 centimetres for the younger ones amongst us. And we get these wonderful creatures. As I say, this very early stage in terms of them being in British waters and so on, they're known as glass eels, but they don't stay as glass eels for very long. And as they go into the estuaries and then into freshwater rivers and so on, they change colour. And before I go any further, just stop and wonder for a minute. We have a fish that's come to the birth in salt water, and it's now, having travelled over 3,000 miles, going into fresh water and doing very well at it. The change between living in a saltwater environment and a freshwater environment is remarkable. Just staggering, that change, how that happens. And I do not believe that's happened by chance. And in the life cycle of the eel, we go back to the days of Genesis and so on. When they were first created, it has to work straight away, or it never works at all. That fish has got to change from living in a saltwater environment to a freshwater environment, and then the cycle goes on. Otherwise, it breaks down and it comes to a terrible end. If you're not impressed with that one, surely that impresses you, does it? And there it is. And it's no longer flat. It's more cylindrical now. It's changed shape. So its constitution is changed, so it can now live in fresh water. It's changed shape. And there they go. And the amazing thing about glass eels, they are so determined to go upstream, so determined to go upriver. They don't. Some of them do, but not many of them stay in the estuaries. They go up those rivers and go inland, and they go over all sorts of natural challenges, and they do, if it's a good year, in great abundance, and they'll go over each other in their desperation, as it were, that drive to go upriver. They'll go over each other and so on. And they can propel themselves, as I've written there, over wet grass, dig through wet sand. It's just a force that's unstoppable. They just keep on going and going. In 2014, which was a better year for eels, I said I was going to comment about them today earlier. Eels generally have diminished in Britain dramatically. No, we have nowhere near the number of eels that we used to, days of old. And if 12 and 14-year-olds are out fishing like I did in those far-off days, they would do very well to catch an eel. They really would. Eels are not as numerous as they were, sadly, for all sorts of reasons, which I'm not going to go into tonight. But 2014, in relative terms, in recent years, it was a good year. And you've read it by now. Estimated 2 million elvers. Glass eels turn into elvers as they change colour, and they're a little bit bigger. 2 million elvers were helped on their way because their natural barriers are one thing, but when there's man-made barriers as well, that's difficult. So enabling them to move on, and so that we don't lose eels altogether, you've got these volunteers down there on the River Parrett that did that incredible work. And growth from there on is quite dramatic over the years. In northern waters, they grow more slowly than they do in southern regions. So eels that come in and go into the Mediterranean and into southern France and so on, they grow at a different rate to those that may be up in Scotland and so on. But nevertheless, some of them grow quite big. An eel of 5 foot, the females tend to be bigger. I think in times when eels are more commonly caught in Britain, you've got one of about 3 foot, that a male lives about 6 or 7 years, a female for about 10 or 12. However, for some strange reason, there are some pools here and there where they have eels that are there for 25, 30 or even 40 years. There's been an eel recorded, absolutely for sure, was 85 years. And one couple of years ago, at the bottom of a Swedish well, reckoned to be 155 years old. It seems that their lifespan, their duration of their life, varies somewhat. In large densities, such as those traditionally found in the rivers Severn, the Wye, Parrett, which all drain into the Bristol Channel, the majority of glass eels or elvers remain male. But where densities are low, not so many of them, such as the rivers on the east coast of England, like the Suffolk Stour, many change from male to female to improve the odds of successful spawning. Now, I don't think this is anything that the creature decides upon. It's not as if the creature decides this or that. It's the conditions that the creatures find themselves in, and overall how they've been designed that this comes about. This is of God. This is not of chance. But how amazing it is that many change from male to female. Just pause there for a moment. There's a lovely prayer in Nehemiah. Faithful men coming together. And they say, Thou, even thou art Lord alone. Thou hast made heaven, the heaven of heavens, with all the host, the earth, and all the things that are therein, the seas, and all that is therein. And thou preservest them all, and all the host of heaven worship thee. There's this understanding by these men of God that God has created all the stars above, all the heavens of the heavens, but also they realise that which is even in the sea. It's a wonderful opening to a prayer. And I'll go along with those thoughts. God has created the eel. And there's things happening about the eel that I'll probably never understand this side of the kingdom age. So wondrous is it, and it's just an eel. Most of us have no particular interest in such a thing. And even when I saw one in my youth, as I said, I was just put off by its sliminess. Even David wouldn't pick one up, and it's a classy and it looks beautiful. Wondrous creature. Now in September or October, usually after rain, when the moon's overcast, they get the call. And that's not my sentence. I've lifted that straight off the internet on someone commenting about the movement of eels. And I rather like that phrase, they get the call. And then the next sentence or two went on and says, nobody knows how they get this call or what it is. But in September or October, whether the eel's female or male, whether it's been here 5 years, 10 years, or dare I say in some forgotten pool for 40 years, after rain and the moon's overcast, it gets the call and it starts moving. It starts moving to the sea. And just as a young glass eel elver, there was a determination by that creature to go into fresh water and go upstream, upriver. So there's a determination now to go the other way. And go out to find the estuary and go out the estuary and into the sea and beyond. And no one really knows what triggers this. Let's put it that way. Nobody knows what triggers this off. Some make reference to the moon, such as I've got in that sentence. Some make reference to the rain. And yet I've read other articles when we get an old character who's been fishing eels in Norfolk or whatever for all his life, and he's 70 odd, and he says, it has to be a full moon. When I read that, I chuckled in the light of that comment I've got on the screen. Make your mind up. But there's no doubt they do move. And they go across wet grass. They go over land. And how about this? Due to their rigid gill structure, silver eels, as they're called now, can seal water within their gills. This means they can survive 12 hours or even up to 48 hours out of the water. So the gills have been so designed by God to do that at that point. This fish is changing again. It's changing. It's got to change again because it's lived in fresh water for all those years, and now it's going to move into brackish water, and then it's going to go into salt water. It's got to go and cope in salt water again. But en route, it's got to go over land, possibly. In days gone by, generations older than my own, people out in the country, in coastal areas, they'd see eels going over ground. Anyone see eels in the other? And by that time, such is the change in the creature, the gut is dissolved. It hasn't got a stomach. It's not going to eat again. What causes that to be? How does that happen? It just lives off the stored energy of its fat alone. There's more to it than that. The eye's enlarged. The eye pigments change for optimal vision in dim blue clear ocean light. On the top you've got the yellow eel. Underneath you've got the silver eel. And it's the silver eels that are on the move now toward the sea. And if you look carefully at that photograph, you'll see what's being said. The eye gets bigger and it changes so the eye can see in the depths, and we'll see how deep in a moment, in the depths of sea water, of the ocean, as opposed to a shallow stream. It's got a different coloration, as I've already been referred to, different coloration for counter shading. So it helps in terms of predators. Got to change colour as well. It does. It's all being designed to do that. It's been programmed to do that. This is not by a lucky throw of the dice and a lucky throw of the dice again and again and again and again, and about mutation after mutation after mutation over millions and millions of years. No, don't fall for that one. The cycle's got to work round one and then every subsequent round. Otherwise there's no cycle. And so it's programmed to do this, and it changes. Again, some debate on this one. At least 6 months. Some would say it's longer than that. But anyway, at least 6 months, that's the view at the moment. These eels, when they reach the sea, travel at 3,720 miles to the spawning grounds. And I hope you can remember where the spawning grounds were. That sea without a coastline. If they survived the heron, the otter, and another fisherman on the route, and if it had to go over land, and it wasn't longer than 48 hours, they'd end up in the Sargasso Sea. And that has been happening for centuries and centuries and centuries. That was happening for many a long year before 1922. And there's our little diagram. And they have recently discovered in the last couple of years something else which is astounding. The eels first head south towards the Azores. They then pick up the conveyor belt ocean current that propels them towards the Sargasso Sea. They go by the most efficient route rather than the shortest. Up to 3 years ago, everyone thought they went the shortest way. Surely they did. And the problem of the timing is because when these eels go on the move, and when they're reckoned to spawn in April, how can they possibly do 3,720 miles in those few months? How can they possibly do it? How fast are they swimming at? You know, if they swim at 15 miles an hour, they're not going to get there. But now they know. Rather than going shortest route, they go south. They go down off West Africa. And then having got down to West Africa, they're swept along by the current. Probably a lot faster than 15 miles an hour. Now, no one's going to tell me that's come by chance. That some eels, by good fortune, managed to achieve this, and then they reproduced others that somehow remembered, or somehow it was in their genes, so they could do it again and again and again. It's always been the case. It's been designed thus. And so they go the most efficient route rather than the shortest. There's something else they found out in the last couple of years. They spend a lot of time and energy moving vertically in the water. During the day, they might swim as deep as 1.2 kilometres, 3/4 of a mile down, 3/4 of a mile down, and then at night, they come up to about 200 metres. And there's all sorts of discussions as to what's going on there. The behaviour is likely to be connected with navigation, the avoidance of predators. At least that's a common held view. But there are others that say, hang on a minute, it might be something to do with exposure to temperature, and the temperature changes somehow affects them in terms of their reproductive organs. Because eels don't become fully mature to reproduce until they get to the Sargasso Sea. So some think it's got something to do with that. And there are a few people, because there's so many things in the world. There are so many things to be researching. There's so many wonderful things of God's creation. For those scientists, whether they believe in God or not, there's so many things for them to look at. I guess the eel comes down pretty low on the list. So there's still a lot they don't know, and there's only a few people that are looking. But they found out as they put transmitters in one or two eels, just had the technology to do this in recent times. They've done it recently with cuckoos, which is another talk I've done, and another fantastic thing to be following through, seeing the migration of cuckoos. We've learned a lot about cuckoos in the last 3 or 4 years. Anyway, same idea. We've got the technology now to put transmitters and get these transmitters on eels, and they put these transmitters on these eels, and that's how they discovered they go south, most efficient route, go down towards the Azores. The only problem was transmission stops, etc., etc., and they've discovered now that not only otters eat eels, not only herons eat eels, and the occasional human being eats eels, pilot whales eat eels. There's our cycle. The eggs. Whoa, let's go up there. The eggs. I say presume because nobody's actually brought eggs to the surface yet. That makes me laugh. No one's actually done that yet. You get your flathead. You get your flathead, then you get your glass eel, then you get your yellow eel, then you get your silver eel, and then finally, as it goes, those 3,720 miles or thereabouts, the mature eel, and the cycle goes round again, and it's taken years. Years. And the only problem with that cycle is man actually breaking it up through pollution and obstructions. Richard Shelton is recognised as a biologist of some merit to do with fisheries and so on. And he made this comment. It is senseless to spawn in the sea where there are more predators, and then feed in fresh water where there is less food. He can't get his head round it. I mean, the salmon get it right. The salmon do it the other way round. That's sensible. Still incredibly miraculous as far as I'm concerned. But the salmon get it the right way round. The eel does it this way. It's crazy to spawn in the sea where there are more predators and then feed in fresh water where there's less food. But we've got eels, and they've been eels for many a long time. God knows what he's doing. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth. O Lord, How manifold are thy works! In wisdom hast thou made them all. The earth is full of thy riches.